Papua LNG project, and not any other gas agreement or project or petroleum development license in Papua New Guinea. It confirms that in accordance with the spirit and letter of clause 9.6a of the Papua LNG project gas agreement, the changes brought about by the 2020 amendments do not create any inconsistencies with the Papua LNG project gas agreement. Mr. Speaker, the Papua LNG project participants are currently progressing the technical work necessary so that the two Papua LNG project liquefaction trains may proceed within the PNG LNG project's site at Cushion Bay. Once this is complete and following the start of FEED, F-E-E-D, they will submit an application for a petroleum development license. In addition, given the significant capital intensity of the Papua LNG project, which will be around $10 billion to $12 billion, it must be financed using a combination of debt from lenders and equity from project sponsors or the joint venture partners. Prompt passage of the proposed bill during this parliamentary session will demonstrate to sponsors, LNG buyers, and financiers the state's continued full commitment to the Papua LNG project, contract sanctity, and the fiscal regulatory regime contemplated by the Papua LNG project gas agreement. This is why we are proposing this bill for approval today. Mr. Speaker, to achieve this purpose, this oil and gas Papua LNG project amendment bill 2021 is limited to 1, reinstating Oil and Gas Act 1998 provisions affected by 2020 amendments to apply as if they had not been amended in relation to the Papua LNG project gas agreement, and any application for a petroleum development license for the Papua LNG project. And 2, renders the Oil and Gas Act 1998 provisions affected or inserted by the 2020 amendments inapplicable to the Papua LNG project gas agreement, and any application for a PDL for the Papua LNG project. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, and as I have said previously, in any commercial agreement, there have to be some give and some take. This bill gives comfort to Papua LNG project sponsors and financiers so that the Papua LNG project may progress towards FEED, FEED, in line with the mutually agreed timetable announced in May 2021. This is pivotal to progressing a timely development of elk and antelope gas fields that delivers maximum benefits to recognized landowners, the project-affected communities, the independent state of Papua New Guinea, and of course the project's developers and financiers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the question be put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read the second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Oil and Gas Act 1998.
Honorable members, I have to announce that I have received a message from His Excellency the Governor General dated 18 August 2021, recommending the imposition of taxation and expenditure of public money of Papua New Guinea insofar as the bill relates to and provides for such imposition and expenditure. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is the leave granted? Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
Honourable Member for Alatau.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to make a few comments on the legislation before us, and essentially to lend my support or our support to this small legislation, and to thank the Minister and indeed the government for bringing this forward and progressing this very, very important project, which has been late in coming, I suppose, and better late than never, because quite frankly, as we all know, the country is crying for some economic stimulus and some light on the horizon in terms of projects and actions and plans on the positive side in terms of driving the economy. We understand the government's design intent and the actions taken to review the Papua LNG project, examine the gas agreement, and of course the intention to get the best benefits for our people. And I'm glad to say that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that process has been conducted, and it would seem that at the end of the day, what we've been saying after all is that this is an excellent project. We are not going to get all the desires that we want immediately into projects, but it is a progressive exercise, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I stand to confidently say that in the negotiations, the complex negotiations on the Papua LNG project, indeed, it is a progress from the PNG LNG project, which in itself was an excellent project as well. Naturally, the returns weren't everything we wanted, but it has delivered significant revenues to the country. And the Papua LNG is also a further step in that direction. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in actual fact, the proceeds from the Papua LNG project give to the state 51% of the net proceeds in terms of the take to the state. It is a $13 billion US project, and it is very much needed by this country. So we say thank you to the Petroleum Minister and the government, and we encourage the government and thank the government for standing by its commitment to our development partners. Because one of the things that we must reflect as a government, when we make commitments, when we have an existing fiscal regime, when we sign documents, the message we are sending to the world is that Papua New Guinea stands by those agreements. And once those agreements are signed, it is a bad reflection when we make subsequent amendments to the ground rules and a fiscal regime. It sends completely the wrong signal. And the government went forward in total confidence with these international partners. We signed an excellent agreement that gave additional royalties, gave carried financing, gave third-party access to the pipeline. It talked about local content as well. And these were lessons learned from the PNG LNG project. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I say, it's progressive. We look forward to the government adding to that progressive task, improving on the gains for the state, but at the same time being reasonable, allowing an economic return to genuine investors, not changing rules. And one of the concerns that I raise regarding the amendments that we are exempting this project from now is some of those concerns about what happened to the rights of landowners, for example, in terms of a development forum, in terms of excising some of the land around projects and removing the landowner rights, it would seem, in this exercise. And so there are concerns still standing about those existing amendments that have also affected the Papua LNG project, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And the other thing is going forward, and without preempting, but there's legislation also coming to the Parliament, again, that continues to tamper with legislation around ownership of minerals and the establishment of companies and the like outside of the transparent government process and the oversight of Parliament, that we look forward to debating about that when it comes forward. But all in all, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I support this exercise because it demonstrates the government is standing by its original commitment, which is very important. And we thank the partners that have invested into this significant project. We look forward to the FEED being concluded. We look forward to the investment program started because we know it's going to generate a lot of jobs. We know it's going to mean a lot of training for Papua New Guineans. We know it's going to stimulate revenue into the government coffers and translate down into service. But at the same time, we express concerns about where some of that revenue will be going. And then I allude back to some of the subsequent debates we will have about the government channeling large amounts of government resources and revenue into entities that are not subject to this parliamentary process and scrutiny and oversight. And that is something that we must be very conscious of, particularly in times when economy is tough and we are looking for money. And we know that significant dividends and other revenue streams are going to entities that are not subject to the parliamentary process. But otherwise, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I commend the Minister and the Government. I thank the Government, and we look forward to this important project progressing as soon as possible. Thank you.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me say thank you to our Petroleum Minister for bringing this amendment back into Parliament to ensure the Oil and Gas Act is consistent and congruent to the PNG, Papua LNG agreement that was signed on the 8th of April 2019. Papua LNG is 12 to 13 billion dollar project. We've had a series of consultations and meeting with the leader in Papua LNG, which is Total. Total has given its fullest commitment that they will not delay. As we speak, they're in pre-FEED, and as early as April next year, they will be announcing FEED for this project. And I have, with the leadership of the Minister, indicate to them that they must stick to their intention. This allows them to go into pre-FEED and FEED, and this will then secure them a PDL under the existing regime in which they signed the Papua LNG agreement with. And the member for Alatau has case in point to all our investors. Papua New Guinea is not a country that is not respectful of the rule of law and agreements that we've signed. You only have to look at our history in the oil and gas business or our history in mining projects. Whatever agreement that has been signed, even if government come and go, but to the spirit and intent of those agreements, so long as it is consistent and hang in law, then those agreements will stand the test of time and scrutiny. I also commend the Minister as we took office. As the member for Alatau did indicate, the project economics sit at 51% to us and 49% to them. And we pushed higher in as far as what we could maximize from the 51% gain. And a better definition of local content, a better definition of domestic market obligation, a better definition of what it entails strategic pipeline. And let me appreciate Total in the way they've responded. Total came in with an element of flexibility that this country deserves to ensure that maximum gain, not just from the 51% space, but from the total project, is felt by our country. I want to appreciate Gulf Provincial Government and the Gulf people for ensuring that they remain patient to this one. It wasn't easy. In the last 2 years, not just domestic factors, but more importantly, the international marketplace and investment destination for the gas business did compel Total to look elsewhere. More so in the last 2 years, Mozambique was their focus. Lest we forget, Mozambique has 80 TCF of gas. Ours in Papua LNG is only 6.6 TCF of gas. But circumstances beyond Total's control and our control has now pushed them to look more into us, especially with Papua New Guinea's strategic position and with the option of spot market gas at premium price available closer to home in as far as production and sale to our Asian market was concerned. Total has given us full assurance. With this amendment, they will ensure they do their best to mobilize the project partners And just like PNG LNG project is 70% bank finance, this one will be 70% or so financed by bankers, and the project equity partners will support with the residual of the cost that is needed to support this project being moved. So it is timely, and I just want to thank our Gulf province government as well as the landowners for their patience. I give total assurance. We don't want the situation that is familiar with PNG LNG project to be passed to Papua LNG, especially in respect to landowner identification and discussions with provincial government. These conversations must flow ASAP, and the due landowners are seated at where they're supposed to sit, as well as Gulf provincial government be given its rightful place in as far as government respect is concerned. That is an assurance I give to our landowners in PRL 15, as well as the Gulf provincial government as we go through this last hurdle, legal hurdle, to ensure Papua LNG is progressed. And it's a good news for our treasurer to factor in his economic modeling for 2022, 2023 going forward. Taking this time also, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also announce our government is working full stream to ensure Wafi Golpu is being progressed. Pasca and PNG gas projects are being relooked at. These are activities running concurrently as we speak when we handle Papua LNG that should be off the block at the very earliest. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that a question be put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. In accordance with Constitution required, the question is that the bill now be read the third time. In accordance with Constitution required, the requirement, the bill must be passed by an absolute majority of 56 members. Clerk, please ring the bell. Attendants, open the door. Attendants, close the door. The question is that the bill now be read the third time. Would those in favor please stand? With those who are against, please stand. Honorable members, those that vote in favor 79 and noes 0. Clerk.
Head reading. A bill for an act to amend the Oil and Gas Act 1998.
Thank you, Minister. Any petitions? Notices? Honorable members, we have 45 minutes question time. Honorable members, as we continue on the question time, I will ask the Treasurer to continue from the question raised yesterday and the Parliament was suspended. The Minister Treasurer will respond to the question raised by a member for Koma Magarima. Minister of Treasury.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And again, I want to thank the member for Koma Magarima for his series of questions on our financial sector. In relation to the first question, am I aware and what has my department done to address the conflicting statements by the Central Bank and FASU? Mr. Speaker, I am aware of a public notice that was published by the Central Bank seeking to publicly distance itself from actions taken by FASU against BSP for non-compliance. The notice clearly undermines FASU and therefore our government's ability to regulate our financial system. I shall be issuing instructions to both Treasury and the Central Bank to provide me with all details mentioned in that notice and then determine the appropriate course of action. Who were the 8 PEPs identified by FASU? I am advised, Mr. Speaker, that FASU is not able to give that information because apparently they are not at liberty to give it to this Parliament. But I intend to investigate further what appropriate action is available to my office. Who's that transferred several millions of kina through the Bank of South Pacific. Mr. Speaker, as I was mentioning yesterday when the sound system became unsound. PEPs, or politically exposed persons, are typically government officials, members of SOE boards, relatives, and even close associates. I have yet to receive details from FASU, so I am not aware of who the culprit